Today I'm going to teach you guys how to pick for solo queue. Now I'm sure we've all been in situations where you're the last pick, you get to see what the enemy's picks all are, your teammates are all playing roles that they're comfortable with, but you're not, you have to fill, and you just don't know what's the right pick at that point. And even if you did, chances are you don't know how to play that champion. A lot of times mistakes like that can cost you games right from the get-go, and it'll make you uncomfortable throughout the entire game. Here's how to avoid that. So the first thing to picking correctly in solo queue, or more so filling in solo queue, is to understand the champions in the game, so all of them. When I first started playing the game, I didn't really know what role I was playing. Back then, nobody really played one role in particular. Everybody really played everything. So what I did was I'd go to a lot of websites that would detail the specifics behind the champion. So they would tell you the scaling, the base values at every level, the base health, base armor, all sorts of things for each champion. And from there, just by looking at that, you can gather enough information to really tell what the champion does and how it wants to interact with other parts of the game. So for example, if you see a champion that has really high base values and low scaling, that tells you immediately, okay, this champion doesn't benefit very well from items, but he benefits well from levels and is strong in the early game, just because that's the way base values are. It's something that you don't need to purchase, it'll always be strong. That's just the way things are. And that tells you that, okay, this is something that will synergize well with champions that either need somebody to protect them through the early game, or when you want to overwhelm somebody in the early game by just picking other champions that have strong early games. So just looking at the base values of different champions can let you really understand how strong somebody is throughout certain phases of the game and kind of what they do with each other. Another example, you look at a pick like Leona, it's like, you know what, that's a lot of damage. She offers a lot of damage and a lot of CC, so you want to have somebody that can really utilize her passive as much as possible to do a lot of damage. And then you're thinking to yourself, but most AD carries really just have auto attacks. Is there an AD carry in the game that can use more abilities or spells throughout their aggressive phase? It's like, oh, Corki. Corki has a Gatling gun, does multiple instances. He also has more spells that utilize that proc more often than almost other AD carries. Corki has a lot of good synergy with Leona. So looking at picks like that can really help you understand what champions synergize well with each other. Another example, somebody like Wukong, who has a high armor shred on his Q, and then you think to yourself, flat physical damage. If you can shred the armor of one target, who can deal a lot of physical damage or individual physical damage to somebody and can really benefit off of Wukong's concussive blow? I don't remember the name of it. Anyways, champions with high burst physical damage. Surprise, Graves is a champion that does high burst physical damage and can really benefit from the armor shred that Wukong does, as well as the CC. So looking at champions like that can help your mind understand the synergy between heroes, and that will allow you to pick better. Now, there's a couple of other things that when I started doing it, I came to kind of write down as my own little personal rules for solo queue, and those are, you can never have too much CC. So the more CC, the better. It doesn't matter, as much CC as possible. It really does not matter, because what you want to do is you want to thrive off of the discomfort of your opponents. You want to know that one of your opponents walked into you and he got fucking headbutted, pulverized, ground slam, body slam, all sorts of CCs, and permanently rune prison, and he couldn't do anything. And that discourages the enemies from fighting you. That discourages the teammates that see, wow, that guy really got shit on. I don't think I want to go in there anymore. And that gives your team a little boost of confidence and makes the opponents kind of retract in their own little shell. And that's what you want to do. Same thing for damage. Another little rule, you can never have too much damage. You have an enemy walk into a Kha'Zix, Ryze, and an Annie, and they get killed instantly, then they're gonna think, I don't think I want to do that again. Their teammates saw their own tank, the tankiest guy on the team, the most fed guy on the team, get killed in 2 seconds. They're thinking, shit, how are we gonna do this? I'm not so confident in this game anymore. And that helps your team morale, or your team morale, lowers the enemy's morale, and just is an overall good thing to do. So when in doubt, always pick high damage, high CC. You also get bonus points if you pick champions that offer both high damage and good CC. So an example of champions like that are things like Kennen, Annie's, Riven's, Ryze, picks like that. Obviously there's dozens more, but picks like that can really turn the tides of things because they have a lot of damage and a lot of CC and are very overwhelming to play against. The other rule, this is my favorite, personal favorite by the way, and I absolutely detest when this happens in my games. You always need a mix of physical damage and magical damage. Now, why is that? Now, one of the things that I'm going to tell you is that you don't need to worry about your scaling. So saying shit, they outscale us is not going to matter if you actually have enough physical and magic damage, because the only way that you're not going to be able to dish out enough damage throughout the entirety of the game is going to be if they can buy one type of resistance and then survive you. So if you're all physical damage, all they need to do is everybody buys a Randuin's, and now you're lacking a lot of your damage. But if you have mid to early game champions, but they're both magic and physical damage, then it's not really going to matter that much if they can only buy, if they can't buy one resistance, just because they can't protect themselves against all types of damage, because you just don't have that much room for itemization for just defensive purposes. Otherwise, they're not going to have enough damage, and then you're going to win because you have damage. So don't worry about the scaling. Simply focus on having a good source of physical and magical damage in the game, and you'll be golden. So once you got those rules stuck in your head, you're going to need to learn a couple of champions. And it's not that many, and to be honest, one for each role is usually enough, especially if they're non-meta. So the first thing I recommend, learn non-meta picks. So play what you're comfortable. It doesn't matter if the LCS isn't playing it. It doesn't matter if Faker didn't play it. Things like that. Just don't bother with that. Just play whatever you are good at, whatever you're comfortable with, and can fill those rules that I have given you. The whole, does it fill the composition with enough physical and magic damage? CC, does it have CC and damage? And that's pretty much it. As long as you're good at it, you're good to go. Also, Taric is not a good pick. Don't fucking pick Taric. I'm just going to put that one out there. Don't mess with Taric. Anyways, one pick is often enough, especially if it's non-meta, but as the game progresses, you're going to end up encountering people that play that one champion, and you might be in trouble. So I recommend 2 to 3 champions for each role, and I'll give you some examples for each one. So for instance, in the top lane, there's usually 3 things that are the standard picks for top lane. Either a tank, a bruiser, or an AP carry. Any tank will do. You can play Sion if it's your go-to guy. You can play Malphite. You can play, I don't know, did I say Malphite? Dr. Mundo. Just pick one tank and just be good at that one guy. And it's never going to be banned if it's a kind of random guy that's not in the meta. And if it gets picked, then you're going to have 2 other picks for that role, because you're going to have one pick for the bruiser role and another one for the AP. So for the bruiser role, any bruiser will work at that point. It doesn't matter if it's meta. As long as you're good at the champion, you'll be golden. So things like Wukong, Irelia, Gnar, all sorts of picks can work for the carry department. By the way, Riven, excellent one. If you can play Riven, Riven is solid. She'll work mid lane and top. Great for bruiser and filling the physical damage part. Once you're past that one though, you need your AP. So just pick an AP champion that you're comfortable with and is easy to play. A very common one that we see is Vladimir. Vladimir, very simple, doesn't have skill shots. I guess his ultimate's a skill shot. He's good sustain and can really punish somebody that doesn't know how to play against Vlad. Has great scaling and is relatively easy to execute. So picks like that, as long as you have 3 in your kit and you're good to go for any game. And the best part about them is that those 3 picks are very good at just being first pick, especially in solo queue, because a lot of the times they can be a little bit ambiguous, since you can play Malphite mid, Irelia mid, or Vlad mid kind of thing. Those are examples, by the way. Pick whatever you're comfortable with. Just be sure to be able to fulfill all 3 of those roles: the tank, the AP carry, and the AD carry. Because if you're the last pick of your team and you have a team composition that is Graves bottom, Riven jungle, Talon in the mid lane, and your only pick is like Nasus top, you're not really going to be assisting your team comp very much. At that point, you're probably going to need to play an AP carry. So good AP carries, by the way, since I mentioned that you get bonus points for picking CC and damage, Lissandra and Ryze, and Rumble to an extent. Lots of CC, lots of disruption, and really high amounts of burst can be excellent for solo queue and relatively easy to execute. Lissandra more than the Ryze and the Rumble. So that's pretty much for top lane. For the jungle, you're going to be a little more flexible. It doesn't really matter, especially if you don't have that AP or the AD pick. It matters to an extent, and there's going to be a couple of games where you're going to have an all AD composition or an all AP composition, and you're going to have to fulfill the extra role of either high physical damage or magic damage. So it'll be beneficial for you to have that one other pick. So a good example is being able to play a Mumu jungle and then like a Pantheon or a Rek'Sai or a Jarvan even. Just one pick of each is usually enough, especially since those aren't really that meta. They often won't be picked and won't be banned, so it'll be easy for you to get away with those champions. Forgive me if Amumu is still banned in like bronze, or I don't know where Amumu's banned, but if you can't play Amumu, then play Evelynn or play something else. Like just something that has magic damage will do. Fiddlesticks if you have to. Sejuani, I don't know. Just pick something that has magic damage. No one of those, not necessary, highly recommended. It's pretty much like those resumes. You see, oh, not necessary for you to have a 5-year degree, but we highly recommend it. So you know you're not going to get the job if you don't have that 5-year degree. Onto the mid lane, you're really going to be a lot more creative with this one. As I mentioned before, you can play pretty much anything in the top lane into mid lane. And the same thing applies. Just know one pick that's physical, one pick that's magic, preferably non-meta if you really don't play that role, and it'll always be available for you. So if you're a fan of top lane Wukong, surprise, you can play top lane Wukong in the mid lane. If you're a fan of top lane Vlad, you can play that mid lane. Kennen, all sorts of picks can really work for both, and some to an extent from the jungle. Now if you're just completely inept at playing different champions and say you're only AD carry main, fine, then play an AD carry mid lane. Lucian can work in the mid lane. You got picks like Caitlyn, you got Kog'Maw, you can pick him AD or AP. There's a lot of things that you can try in the mid lane, and it'll usually work. As long as you're comfortable with it and know the limits of the champion, you'll see success. So mid lane, we leave for the creativity. And AD carry, similar to the jungle, doesn't need that much creativity. A lot of times you can pretty much pick anything, and it's not really your duty to fill in the gaps of the team composition. Engage is nice, but it's not necessary to come out of the AD carry role. So knowing Urgot or Ashe isn't really that big a deal. So what I like to play for the AD carry is just champions that are relatively simple and offer a good amount of safe damage. So an example is, if you don't know how to play AD carry well, a lot of times people will resort to somebody like Graves, who has good amounts of burst, and even if you fall behind, you can still contribute to a team fight. Same thing with a Corki. You still have decent amount of wave clear, can hit some poke, is relatively safe with their dashes. I highly do not recommend champions that don't have dashes for the AD carry role. Speaking of Corki though, Corki and Kog'Maw are the equivalent of the APs for top, mid, and jungle because they offer more magic damage than any other AD carry. They can usually fulfill the role of the sole source of magic damage if the team composition is lacking it. So those champions can build, Kog'Maw can build all AD and still do enough magic damage that the enemy needs to itemize some magic resistance. Same thing with the Corki, especially since you can include Sorcerer Shoes in the Corki build. I've never tried Sorcerer Shoes on Kog'Maw, but I'm sure it can work since it works in mid lane Kog. I suppose you can do some sort of pseudo hybrid Kog'Maw build in the bot lane if you really want to play AP carry Kog'Maw. Don't really recommend it since I don't think you're going to get any blue buffs, but you can try it. It's a champion that offers magic damage, and it'll allow you to expand the flexibility of your ability to fill in the right team composition. Lastly, for the support role, this is one that you don't need to offer damage to the team comp because obviously you're a support. So instead of having an AD and an AP role that you have to fill, you're going to have an engage and a disengage. But by disengage, there's a kind of a blurry line in I'd say it's more so of disengaged and of engaged champions and just non-engaged champions. Again, pick what you're comfortable with if you don't know how to play support. Usually, for example, for myself, go-to picks will be, I want to pick a champion that is engaged. I think my team comp needs a lot of CC right now. I'll pick somebody like Alistar or Braum, maybe even a Leona. Or if I'm thinking, I kind of want to protect my team, I'm not feeling very good, I want to kind of hang back, I'm a little distracted right now, I'm just going to pick something that is a bit more relaxed. I'll go with a Janna, go with a Soraka, picks like that, and as long as you have one of each, you'll be good to go. So a good combination is knowing things like Alistar and Janna, Leona and Soraka, Annie and Nami. So as you look for more supports, the line between engage and disengage starts blurring because these champions can be very flexible. So Thresh can be a good engage and a disengage. You got champions like Sona that are also engaged but can peel. You got picks like Nami that can be an amazing engage but at the same time a godly disengage. Things like that. Not Taric. Don't pick Taric. And I'm not saying this because I had a game with Taric because I haven't played solo queue in a while. I have not played with Taric and I don't want to see it. I just don't think just don't play Taric. Now that we've covered all the roles, let's go back to the initial thoughts that made us create that list. So the first thing is you want to thrive off of the enemy's confusion and discomfort. So picking high amounts of damage and high amounts of CC will always do that. When in doubt, pick high amounts of damage. So a lot of times if I'm playing jungle, I'm like, not really sure what I should pick here. Bam, Kha'Zix. Why Kha'Zix? Because he has one of the highest amounts of physical damage in the game. His scaling is insane, and no matter how much armor they stack, I know it'll be useful throughout the game. Because I know that the AD carry is not going to have 5 armor items. Same with the AP. Same, maybe with the support. But the same idea goes for APs. So I'm playing mid lane, like, what am I going to play? I'm not really sure what works here. I know that CC is good and damage is, I'll just play Victor. No matter how much magic resist they'll have, I know somebody on their team is not going to have 4 magic resist items. And even if they do, I'll still be able to chunk them significantly because of just how much raw damage I have. Or if I'm thinking a little more utility-wise, I'll just pick something with a shitload of CC. So picks like Leona, the Alistar, the Amumu's, all sorts of things. There's no wrong answer for this, guys. Just pick what is good. That's the beauty of the meta that was created. A lot of times you can just pick whatever you're comfortable with, and if you can make the champion work and really understand how it interacts with the previous points of understanding how, with just looking at the base values and the numbers of the champions, you kind of know where they're going, you will understand what is a good pick. The best way of learning this, though, is both reading these things and practicing as many champions as possible, going to normals, going to A-ranks, pick new champions and really get the feel of them. And that way you'll really know when you see a Victor approach you, you understand how much time do I have to survive between his cooldowns. The answer is not, because he's broken and does a shitload of damage. Next point, don't worry about CC or scaling. As long as you have a mixture of physical and magic damage, you'll be good to go. And I hope that these really help for filling solo queue. And personally, I get a lot more satisfaction when I can play Phil better than other roles, to be honest, because it's really enjoyable to know so many aspects of the game, and it'll expand your knowledge of becoming a better player at whatever one role you're actually maining. Just because next time you're maining that one role and you interact with one of the champions that you feel, now you have an inside look as to how they feel when they see you, what the limits of that champion is against your own. And that truly is the way of becoming a better player, because knowing your enemy, what's that saying? It's like knowing your enemy, know yourself better than you, whatever it is, it'll help you get better.